Today, we are opening a specific type of time capsule, one made of plastic and QWERTY keys, and looking at a device that for a few glorious years was so much more than just a piece of technology.
Oh, absolutely. It was the ultimate statement of influence,
It was. It was glued to the palms of presidents, rock stars, and every single executive who needed to be always on. I am talking, of course, about the BlackBerry.
It's a truly remarkable story because the rise was so total and then the collapse was just so incredibly rapid.
Mm.
You have this indispensable cultural phenomenon, the device that earned the nickname Crackberry, that went from, worldwide market dominance to nearly obsolete in under 2 decades.
Mhm.
It's a spectacular rise followed by an equally spectacular and, frankly, catastrophic fall.
And that's our mission today. We are unpacking the source material that details this entire volatile journey, the dazzling technological breakthroughs that really founded the smartphone era, the peak dominance, the cultural weight.
And the profound strategic and managerial failures that ultimately led to its downfall.
Exactly. We want to know how research in motion, or RIM, pioneered the modern mobile device, but then failed so profoundly to adapt to the market it essentially created.
Well, to set the context, you really have to go back to the foundations. The parent company, Research in Motion, was founded way back in 1984 in Waterloo, Ontario.
Right, by Mike Lazaridis and Douglas Friesian.
Nosritis was the visionary engineer. He was focused entirely on the technical perfection, the architecture of the systems. But the company's trajectory was really defined when Jim Balsillie joined.
And that's when they established that legendary and ultimately tragic co-CEO partnership.
That's it. Balsillie took charge of the aggressive, cutthroat sales, the finance, the overall business strategy.
The famous genius duo. You have Lazaridis, the internal tech wizard obsessed with engineering perfection, and then Balsillie, the external hyper-aggressive businessman.
And that initial structure, where the technology focus was constantly competing with the market and sales focus, it ended up being one of the central challenges that this deep dive is going to address.
It gave them incredible speed to market at first, didn't it?
It did, but later on it became a source of paralysis.
Right.
It's a classic cautionary tale where institutional success, driven by this dual, sometimes contradictory leadership, ultimately bred institutional arrogance. They just couldn't agree on which future to build.
Okay, so before we get to the conflict, let's trace how that initial success happened. It started before BlackBerry was even a brand name, right?
Way before.
Okay, let's trace the technological lineage then. RIME didn't start with the smartphone. They started by mastering two-way digital communication. Take us from the early inter-affective pager series up to the very first device to carry the name BlackBerry.
All right, so we begin in the mid-1990s. The company was focused on pagers that could actually receive and send messages, which, was revolutionary for the time. The journey really began with the inter-affective pager 900, announced in 1996. It was this clamshell device that offered true two-way paging, and this was quickly refined into the inter-affective pager 950.
But the real commercial validation, the moment the enterprise world stood up and took notice, that came a bit later.
Absolutely. In February 1998, RIM secured a massive contract that legitimized them immediately. IBM bought a staggering $10 million worth of the interactive pager 800.
Wow, $10 million in 1998 dollars.
Yeah, that is the huge amount of capital invested in what was, essentially a niche corporate communications tool. It showed immediate traction and confidence from the most demanding corporate users.
So that immediately placed them not as some gadget maker, but as a critical enterprise solutions provider. So the tech was proven, the commercial model was working. When did the BlackBerry name finally appear?
That was January 19, 1999, with the release of the BlackBerry 850.
Okay.
This device was an email pager, similar in form factor to the 950, but is the first to fully integrate email capability and drop that clunky interactive pager branding. It offered a crucial differentiation, instant access to your corporate inbox.
And the sources have this fantastic detail about the name itself. Like most people, I just always assumed it was because the casing was black and it was sleek.
That's a very common guess, but the truth is actually much more organic.
Yeah.
The name was coined by a marketing company, Lexicon Branding,
Okay.
and they were working with the visual design of the device, specifically those tiny, dense, globe-shaped physical keyboard keys.
Ah, right.
The keys resembled the small, individual drupelets that make up the BlackBerry fruit. It was this clever, organic connection to their most defining physical feature, and it sounded so much better than, Pocket Link or some other tech jargon.
So they had the name, they had the look, but the true technological breakthrough was the engine under the hood.
Mm.
What was that killer feature that took the BlackBerry from being a great pager to the defining device of the early 2000s?
It really comes down to two revolutionary concepts: push email and the physical interface.
Let's start with push email.
Push email was the true game changer, and this really needs emphasizing. Before the BlackBerry, mobile email was tedious. You either had to tether a device to a PC or you had to manually connect and poll the server.
So you had to actively check. You had to ask the server, do I have mail?
Exactly.
Right.
BlackBerry pioneered the always-on state. Messages were instantly relayed from the corporate mailbox to the device via RIM's highly specialized Network Operations Center, the NOC. The email was literally pushed to you in real time.
That eliminated the PC requirement. It offered immediate asynchronous communication, and it gave busy professionals an advantage no other device could match.
Right, and this constant connectivity, this feeling of immediacy, that's where the BlackBerry idea was born.
It transformed email from an administrative task you checked into, like an immediate stream of consciousness, a constant part of your work life.
And the second factor was purely tactile.
The keyboard.
The physical interface. The miniature QWERTY keyboard. It normalized and popularized thumb typing, transforming mobile interaction. And while early models navigated using a scroll wheel on the side, they quickly refined the user input.
Right, I remember the scroll wheel. Then came the trackball.
The Pearl series introduced the trackball, allowing for precise four-way scrolling, and later, the 8500 series moved to the optical trackpad, which provided the feel of a mouse inside the device. RIM invested heavily in making that physical interaction feel intuitive and efficient.
This sounds like a lightning-fast evolution from a pager to a mobile office. When did the BlackBerry finally stop being just an email device and become what we recognize as a fully converged cell phone?
That critical milestone was the BlackBerry 5810, released in 2002. This was their first true cell phone version.
Okay.
It ran on the standard GSM network and used GPRS for data. And while you often had to plug in a headset to talk because the device was so focused on data, it didn't even have a physical earpiece or microphone.
Wow, really?
Yeah. But it decisively marked the shift from RIM being merely a pager company to being a smartphone pioneer.
And their early market positioning was incredibly smart, if a little narrow. They weren't chasing teenagers, they were chasing power.
They were laser-focused. Their initial target was strictly the high-end corporate world and government entities, mainly in the US and Canada. The value proposition was security, reliability, and sheer efficiency.
And that strategy earned them a reputation for secure communications that led to the U.S. government, particularly the Department of Defense and other federal agencies, becoming some of their largest and most reliant customers.
Absolutely. But that enterprise focus, as you can imagine, must have created some blind spots later on.
Oh, for sure.
It really did. The sources highlight that the enterprise focus led to slower international adoption, particularly in Europe. When RIM debuted in Europe in 2001, the appeal was diminished because text messaging SMS was already extremely well established and affordable among consumers.
So they were fighting an ingrained consumer habit, a social expectation that instant messaging was cheap and widespread, which was totally unlike the U.S. corporate world, where the demand for instant, secure email connectivity trumped everything else.
Exactly. That initial prioritization of corporate needs over consumer desires created a foundational rigidity that would, really plague them later on.
That's a fascinating insight. So they were already lagging the European consumer curve before the iPhone even existed.
A subtle but absolutely critical detail.
The corporate dominance was just the warm-up act. In our next section, BlackBerry transcends business and becomes a full-blown cultural icon, but not without facing a crisis that almost wiped them out.
The turning point really comes post-2006.
This is the era when BlackBerry transcended the executive suite. It went truly mainstream around the time of the Pearl and, of course, the launch of BlackBerry Messenger BBM.
That's when the consumer floodgates just opened. The release of the BlackBerry Pearl in September 2006 marked a real pivot toward a more mass-market design. It was sleeker, more refined, it had a camera, and then the rollout of BBM. BBM was critical.
Why was it so important?
Because it offered free, instant, and highly reliable messaging between BlackBerry users.
And it had features that were way ahead of their time.
Absolutely. Read receipts, which we all take for granted now, were a unique selling point of BBM years before they became standard anywhere else. It created this powerful closed network effect.
Right. If you wanted to talk instantly and for free with your friends who are also executives or hip consumers, You had to have a BlackBerry.
That's what propelled its reach far outside the enterprise niche.
And this rapid market saturation gave birth to that unforgettable nickname.
The crackberry phenomenon. It was formally recognized by Webster's New World College Dictionary in 2006, defined by the device's seemingly addictive nature. It became a visible status symbol. Owning one meant you were important, you were responsive, you were crucial. You could hear that distinctive tap-tap-tapping of the physical keyboard everywhere in Congress, on Hollywood sets, in airports.
But right at this peak of influence, RIM was embroiled in an existential legal battle, the NTP patent war. That almost took the whole house down. This wasn't just some minor licensing spat.
Oh no, this threatened to shut down the entire U.S. system.
How did that even start?
It was a massive, almost fatal crisis. The NTP Inc. patent infringement lawsuit began way back in 2000, claiming RIM infringed on patents relating to their centralized email system. The trial took place in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia.
Which is notoriously known as the Rocket Docket for its aggressive, fast-moving patent litigation.
Exactly, and the NTP people were very aggressive. In 2003, the jury found RIM guilty of willful infringement.
Oof, willful.
Yeah. This led to $53 million in punitive damages and, crucially, a judicial injunction that threatened to shut down BlackBerry systems across the United States entirely.
It just boggles my mind that a product so central to global business and government could face a sudden, permanent off switch. What were the high stakes involved at that moment?
The stakes were national security level. I mean, the sources show that the U.S. Department of Justice and the Department of Defense filed official briefs with the court, stressing the device's absolute importance for national security.
So they were basically saying the country depends on this.
Pretty much. They noted the massive number of U.S. federal government users. The Department of Defense explicitly argued that an injunction, even one that excluded government users, would be unworkable because the device was mission-critical for their operations.
The government was essentially telling the judge, you can't do this, the country depends on it. That gives you a sense of the sheer reliance RIM had built up.
It was an unprecedented moment. RIM scrambled. They were developing software workarounds to try and bypass the patents, but the threat of the injunction remained terrifyingly real.
So how did it get resolved?
Finally, after immense pressure and some very stern warnings from the judge, RIM and NTP settled in March 2006. The price tag: a staggering $612.5 million US.
Over $500 million. That's an enormous sum, especially for that time.
It was enormous, but, analysts at the time considered it potentially a good deal for RIM because it was a full and final settlement of all claims, which eliminated any future royalties on the technology in question.
So it removed the legal cloud and allowed their explosive growth to continue.
Exactly. But it was a clear warning sign of the high cost of holding tightly to intellectual property and, neglecting to innovate around it.
That's a critical point. Given the NTP crisis threatened to shut down U.S. service, why did they go on to repeat this kind of legal and IP rigidity when facing competitors like Apple and Google later? Did they learn nothing from that $500 million payout?
And that's the tragic flaw, the institutional arrogance we mentioned earlier. They viewed the NTP case as a legal hurdle they successfully navigated, not a strategic warning sign.
They just thought they were untouchable.
They believed their enterprise market position was unassailable, and their technology was untouchable. They failed to internalize that the cost of defending the past might prevent them from investing in the future.
Now let's pivot to the fun part of this deep dive. BlackBerry as the ultimate status symbol. I mean, nothing advertised importance quite like the political weight they acquired.
The single most invaluable piece of marketing was, without a doubt, U.S. President Barack Obama.
Oh, absolutely.
After his 2008 inauguration, he famously insisted on keeping his BlackBerry, despite intense security concerns and protocols urging him to use a different, more secure device.
And the marketing value of that was insane.
Oh, experts estimated that presidential endorsement alone, just the image of the leader of the free world tethered to this device, was worth between $25 and $50 million. It just signaled relevance and unmatched security.
And this political loyalty extended beyond the Oval Office. We know Hillary Clinton continued using her BlackBerry even after becoming Secretary of State, which, later became central to her infamous email controversy.
Right, and the device was critical for government forces globally. The UK's West Yorkshire Police, for example, heavily utilized BlackBerries to allow officers to perform basic desk work like filing reports or checking databases directly from the mobile device.
Which increased street presence, reduced administrative costs?
Right, it exemplified the device's efficiency. Up until 2013, the U.S. State Department still approved BlackBerry devices for U.S. missions abroad because of their encryption standard.
So we have presidents and police, but the cultural reach was far wider. It touched celebrities and, kind of ironically, even the criminal underworld because of that famed security.
The consumer loyalty generated some fantastic anecdotes. Kim Kardashian's devotion to the BlackBerry Bold model was legendary.
Oh, I remember this.
She was one of the most visible advocates for the physical keyboard. In 2014, long after the iPhone dominated, she famously said, "BlackBerry has my heart and soul. I love it. I'll never get rid of it."
She even kept a stockpile of older models, right? Because she was afraid the phone would go extinct.
She did. That's real dedication. Like she was prepping for a very specific type of apocalypse.
The end of the world, but only if it meant no physical keyboard.
And then you have the surprising literary connections. E.L. James, the author of 50 Shades of Grey, wrote much of the first draft of that global blockbuster on her BlackBerry.
You're kidding.
Nope, it was truly a device for high-volume text input.
And perhaps the most astonishing conflict of interest was Google chairman Eric Schmidt.
Yes, the executive chairman of the company that launched Android, Google, was a known, long-time BlackBerry user.
That's incredible.
He preferred the physical keyboard for actual work. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
monumental testimony to the quality and efficiency of that tactile input experience. The man responsible for the world's most popular mobile OS was secretly using the competitor.
And finally, let's touch upon the dark irony of that security. The very feature RIM champions secure communication through BBM became a tool for organized crime.
This is where the story truly highlights the duality of the technology. Reports emerged that the Italian criminal group in 'Ndrangheta used BBM to communicate overseas with groups like the Gulf Cartel, a Mexican drug cartel, back in 2009.
And why?
Because BBM texts were very difficult to intercept by traditional law enforcement methods. The White House and the cartels were relying on the exact same core security promise.
This universal, influential reach really marks the peak of BlackBerry's global power.
It's a stunning moment when a device is equally essential to global governance and global crime. But despite this seemingly unassailable dominance and cultural weight, the ground beneath RIM began to shake in 2007. This next section is the moment of failure, the arrival of Apple and Android.
This is the moment the strategic rigidity became fatal. The 2007 iPhone launch and the 2008 Android launch were a technological and cultural earthquake that BlackBerry executives completely failed to grasp, at least according to the internal accounts detailed in the book Losing the Signal. Let's focus intensely on that internal perception, that arrogance factor that was so devastating. How did RIM leadership actually react to the iPhone?
With profound, almost total dismissal. They operated from a position of institutional arrogance born of 2 decades of unmatched success in the enterprise market.
So they looked at the iPhone and just saw its flaws.
Exactly. They judged it entirely by their existing corporate metrics.
What were some of those specific dismissive comments?
Well, RIM COO, Larry Conley, for example, he notoriously dismissed the iPhone, focusing on 2 elements: its rapid battery drain
Okay, fair enough at the time.
and the lousy digital keyboard. Conley's view was that it was a resource-intensive toy, a niche novelty that couldn't handle serious enterprise work.
And Jim Balsillie, the marketing and sales driver, what did he think?
Basilli's initial famous reaction was a confident, almost condescending, "It's okay, we'll be fine."
Oof. Famous last words.
They fundamentally viewed the iPhone not as a computer in your pocket or a cultural lifestyle change, but merely as an enhanced mobile phone with playful features targeted at younger consumers. They completely missed the significance of the massive fluid touchscreen display and, most crucially, the platform's openness to third-party applications.
They saw the lack of a keyboard as a barrier to entry, but RIM saw their keyboard as their moat.
Exactly. They believed their competitive advantage, the keyboard, security, battery life, would insulate them. They failed to grasp that the world was moving from a work tool to a life device.
This internal complacency meant that their first attempt to respond to the market was a disastrous failure, the BlackBerry Storm in 2008.
The Storm was RIM's frantic, rushed attempt at a touchscreen response. Balsillie, driven by carrier pressure, particularly from Verizon, pushed hard for a device to compete with the iPhone.
And this is a key example of the breakdown of the co-CEO structure, right?
Absolutely. The technologist, Lazaridis, and the businessman, Balsillie, were totally at odds about how to proceed.
So what was the conflict?
Well, Lazaridis, the engineer, saw the complexity and the inherent flaws in rushing a touchscreen device, especially one that used a unique SurePress tactile screen that physically clicked down.
I remember that. It felt so weird.
It did. But Balsillie, focused on market share and carrier demands, insisted on speed. The result was a product that saw high initial sales, driven purely by brand recognition, but complaints about performance, bugs, and usability poured in almost immediately.
The storm failure was catastrophic. Why?
Technologically, the SurePress screen was inconsistent, and the operating system was just not built for fluid touch interaction. Strategically, it proved that the company was now trying to copy a competitor while fundamentally misunderstanding the core product.
They didn't get that the iPhone's elegance wasn't just the glass screen. It was the OS built for the glass screen.
Precisely. The storm was the first major alarm bell, raising serious questions among media and investors about RIM's capacity to innovate.
And this failure highlighted the core systemic problem, the co-CEO leadership structure. It had been their engine of growth, but now it was choking their capacity for radical change.
The dual executive structure was fatal in a crisis. When rapid, unified decisions were needed, like, should we abandon the physical keyboard entirely? The split leadership between Lazzaretti on technology and Balsillie on sales created internal conflict and decision paralysis. Sources suggest this compounded the success-driven arrogance, particularly impacting Balsillie, who critics said stopped listening to internal warnings because his previous decisions had made him a billionaire. They became victims of their own past success.
So after the storm disaster, what was their next, even more radical pivot attempt to catch up?
They decided they couldn't fix the legacy OS. It was too old. So in 2010, RIM acquired QNX, a highly reliable real-time operating system primarily used in industrial and automotive applications. This was supposed to be the technological foundation for their new generation of devices.
And the first major product launch on that QNX-based tablet OS was the Playbook tablet in 2011.
Which was an unmitigated disaster. The Playbook was described universally as a total failure. It was released at a high price point, but critically, it lacked basic expected features like native email functionality on launch.
Wait. A tablet without native email from a company that was founded on email? That's astonishing.
You had to tether it to a BlackBerry phone just to access your email. It speaks to the rushed development and the internal pressure. Furthermore, its third-party app support was abysmal. While iOS and Android were exploding with applications, the Playbook's app store was a desert.
So this product failure eroded investor confidence even further and signaled that the company was struggling not just with strategy, but with fundamental execution.
And as if product failures weren't enough, operational integrity suffered a major public relations blow that truly damaged the brand's reputation for reliability.
The global service outages.
The multi-day global service outages in October 2011 were truly embarrassing and catastrophic, especially for a brand whose core promise was reliability and always-on service.
Where did they happen?
They affected millions of BlackBerry users across Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and eventually spread to North and South America. For corporations that relied on BES, the BlackBerry Enterprise Server, for mission-critical communications, this was a betrayal.
What was the technical cause of this widespread blackout?
Research in Motion attributed the cause to a switch failure in their data centers in Waterloo, Canada, and Slough, England, which led to a massive backlog and data overload as the system tried and failed to catch up. The subsequent attempt to restore the backlog just led to further failures.
So what was the real-world impact of being offline for days?
The financial impact was estimated to be between $50 and $54 million, purely from lost revenue and service credits. But the reputational damage was priceless.
Right.
It severely harmed the brand's reputation for reliability among corporate users, who were the only market segment BlackBerry still truly dominated. This crisis intensified the growing calls by shareholders and activist investors for a complete shakeup and change in leadership.
With many publicly demanding the co-CEOs step down.
Exactly. The outage proved that even their legendary infrastructure was fragile.
But 2013, the inevitable happened. The leadership was out, and the numbers reflected a brutal market abandonment.
The numbers, they tell the definitive story of the collapse. Let's just look at the peak and the valley. At its global peak in September 2011, BlackBerry had 85 million subscribers worldwide.
85 million.
By March 2016, that number had plummeted to just 23 million, a loss of over 70% of their user base in less than 5 years.
And their loss in the key U.S. market was nothing short of staggering.
It was. In 2009, RIM held 56% of the American smartphone market. 56%. By November 2012, just 3 years later, Their U.S. market share had collapsed to a mere 7.3%.
Wow.
Meanwhile, iOS and Android had completely dominated the landscape, claiming 88.7% combined. That is not a gradual decline. That is a strategic defeat.
They tried to hang on to emerging markets, which had previously been strongholds. Indonesia was a massive market because of the affordability and popularity of BBM.
Indonesia was a lifeline. But even there, the decline was inevitable. In 2011, BlackBerry shipped 43% of all smartphones in Indonesia. By April 2014, that market share had fallen dramatically to 3%.
Just 3%.
The global trend just couldn't be stopped. The desperation to maintain this market actually led to a shocking incident in Jakarta.
Tell us about that.
When they launched the affordable BlackBerry Z3 in Jakarta, they offered a deep discount to the first 1,000 purchasers. The resulting crowd was so immense and disorderly that it led to a stampede in the capital, injuring several people.
Good grief.
This volatility highlights the extreme, almost frantic measures they were taking in their final attempts to regain even small amounts of traction.
This financial and operational chaos led directly to the inevitable end of the co-CEO era and the subsequent corporate overhaul.
Right. The co-CEO structure was dissolved when Mike Lazaridis and Jim Balsillie both resigned in early 2012. The company went through a short, turbulent period under CEO Thorsten Heinz,
which culminated in the disastrous launch of the new OS BlackBerry 10 and the Z10 device, which failed to attract consumers.
It did. And shortly thereafter, in September 2013, BlackBerry announced massive job cuts. 4,500 staff positions, roughly 40% of their operating staff. They were downsizing the company simply to stay solvent.
There was even a moment when the company nearly vanished entirely with that failed buyout attempt.
Yeah. In September 2013, Fairfax Financial, a Canadian company that already held a 10% stake, made a provisional offer to acquire BlackBerry for $4.7 billion, aiming to take the company private.
And they accepted it provisionally.
They did, but the offer eventually fell through as Fairfax struggled to secure financing and RIM sought other options.
It was a company in free fall, just scrambling for survival. This is when the new direction and the current leader, John S. Chen, came in.
John S. Chen replaced Thorsten Heinz as interim CEO in November 2013. And Chen's mandate was clear: stop the bleeding and pivot the company's focus away from consumer hardware entirely. He released a public message stating, "We are committed to reclaiming our success." But he understood that success would now look fundamentally different.
Focused on enterprise software.
Exactly.
But before that final pivot, they still tried a few last poignant hardware attempts to appeal to the loyalists who still loved the physical keyboard.
They absolutely did.
Yeah.
We saw the square-screened BlackBerry Passport in 2014, designed specifically for professionals who needed wide screens for viewing documents and spreadsheets like in healthcare and architecture. And then the BlackBerry Classic, also 2014, which was a direct attempt to win back users of the beloved Bold series, incorporating the old navigation buttons and trackpad.
The Classic was the final BlackBerry with that truly dominant physical keyboard, and it was officially discontinued in June 2016.
A real end of an era.
The ultimate admission that their proprietary operating system was dead came when they finally, reluctantly, embraced the enemy, Android.
The Android pivot began with the BlackBerry Priv in 2015. It was a slider phone, running the Android operating system with added security and productivity features inspired by the BlackBerry OS.
They were trying to combine the best of both worlds, the apps of Android, with the security of BlackBerry.
Right. But even this failed to gain significant market share. The market was already settled, and the price point was just too high.
So what was the final definitive step away from being a device maker?
In September 2016, BlackBerry Limited officially announced it would stop designing and manufacturing its own hardware. They moved to a pure licensing model.
Partnering with regional licensees like TCL Technology for worldwide markets.
Yep. New BlackBerry-branded products continue to appear under license, like the Key UI2 in 2018, which still sported a physical keyboard running Android. But these devices failed to gain traction and were last produced in 2020.
And the definitive symbolic end of the Classic era.
That was January 4th, 2022. On that date, BlackBerry Limited discontinued all legacy software services, including the beloved BlackBerry Messenger, BlackBerry World App Store, and BlackBerry.net email for all non-Android BlackBerry devices. The hardware was officially silenced.
And what is BlackBerry Limited today? A far cry from a pager company or a smartphone pioneer.
It is a profound corporate metamorphosis. Under John Chen, BlackBerry Limited successfully transitioned its focus to providing highly specialized software and services, primarily in cybersecurity and the Internet of Things, or IoT.
Their software now powers mission-critical systems in governments and enterprises globally, particularly in automotive systems.
That's right. For the fiscal year 2024, their total revenue was reported at $853 million, composed of significant segments like $215 million from IoT revenue and $378 million from cybersecurity. They survived, but only by fundamentally and radically changing their entire corporate identity.
The story of BlackBerry, from pioneering push email to being a specialized enterprise software provider, provides an invaluable roadmap of what not to do when facing radical industry disruption. Let's really drill down into the key business lessons synthesized from this catastrophic downfall.
The lessons are abundant, and they center entirely on a catastrophic failure of vision and adaptability. First, we have to talk about the failure to innovate in product design. They suffered from what you could call physical keyboard tunnel vision.
That stubborn refusal to abandon the physical keyboard.
Exactly. While the market, led by the iPhone, was demanding a fluid, large-screen multimedia experience, BlackBerry stubbornly stuck to the physical QWERTY keyboard. Devices like the Pearl Flip, the Curve, the Bold series, they were just refinements of a successful past design. They weren't revolutions.
Lazaridis was so obsessed with the efficiency of typing that he fundamentally failed to recognize that the phone was evolving from a messaging tool to a viewing and consumption device.
And this links directly to the second massive strategic mistake: ignoring the ecosystem.
This is crucial. The modern smartphone war is fought not on hardware specs, but on the richness of the software environment.
Right. And BlackBerry could not build a competitive app store quickly enough. Their developers were constantly forced to cater to multiple operating systems, BlackBerry OS 5, 6, 7, and then the QNX-based BB10, whereas competitors like Apple and Google provided consistent, vast ecosystems that developers flocked to.
Without apps, consumers just wouldn't buy the device. It's that simple.
It is. This limited functionality compared to rivals was fatal.
And this internal conflict was compounded by the co-CEO failure, which slowed down the pace of change when speed was most necessary. They had to fight internally before they could even fight the market.
That's the management lesson right there.
Yeah.
The dual focus meant they never committed fully to either strategy. When the iPhone came out, Bolsilli wanted a fast, rushed product, the storm, to satisfy carriers, even if it was flawed.
Right. And Lazaridis wanted to perfect the new QNX operating system, leading to multi-year delays and the failure of the playbook.
The divided leadership created contradictory product mandates and ultimately paralyzed the necessary unified pivot that could have saved them.
And the most profound failure, as you noted, was the lack of vision misjudging what the iPhone actually was.
The contrast is so illuminating. The director of the 2023 BlackBerry film captured this philosophical gap perfectly. He described the BlackBerry philosophy as, we're going to give you this tool that is going to help you with the tiny problems that you have, and it's going to be very, very useful.
Purely utilitarian.
Right. In contrast, the Apple vision was, you are going to change the way that you live in order to make this product integrate with you. RIM saw the iPhone as an inferior phone. Apple saw it as the future of personal computing. They totally underestimated the cultural shift towards multimedia and lifestyle integration.
Finally, their strengths became their ultimate weakness through a lack of customer centricity outside their initial niche.
They were defined by their initial market, secure corporate email, and they missed the consumer shift towards social connectivity, streaming, and entertainment. The brand perception became limiting. It was seen as a device only for work, when consumers wanted a single, all-in-one device for work and life.
By prioritizing the niche business market over the broader consumer desires, they essentially conceded the entire future of the smartphone market to their rivals.
They did.
Now, let's revisit the core irony of their offering, security. BlackBerry was the gold standard for encryption, but the sources reveal this vaunted security was often compromised, sometimes willingly, by RIM itself.
This is the dark side of their reliance on government contracts. RIM, under pressure, often agreed to give governments in specific countries like the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and India access to private communications.
Why?
Because these governments often threatened to ban BlackBerry services entirely if law enforcement couldn't decrypt messages between people of interest. So RIM prioritized maintaining access to these large foreign markets over the absolute privacy of their citizens' communications.
And then the mass surveillance disclosures from 2013 showed that U.S. and British intelligence agencies had their own non-consensual methods of accessing BlackBerry data. This is where we need to clarify the technical loophole for our listener.
This is critical. You have to understand the distinction between two core services. Corporate customers use the highly proprietary and encrypted BlackBerry Enterprise Server, BES.
What?
Data traveling through BES was largely safe and encrypted end-to-end. However, consumer users used the BlackBerry Internet Service, BIS, and the 2013 disclosures revealed that the NSA and GCHQ had access to user data on devices communicating through BIS.
And what was the fundamental difference in BIS that allowed this exploitation?
The data passing through BIS was compressed, but critically, it was not encrypted in the same way the BES traffic was. This means that while RIM protected its highest value corporate clients, they inadvertently created a massive loophole for consumer data.
So the GCHQ reportedly had a tool for this.
They did. It was called Scrap Heap Challenge, and it was specifically designed for perfect spoofing of emails from BlackBerry targets using this BIS loophole.
So if you were a high-level executive using BS, you are likely safe. But if you were a celebrity or a regular consumer using BIS, your supposedly secure messages were potentially wide open to intelligence agencies.
Precisely. And there was a further complication related to the actual mathematics of their security. We have to address the specific encryption algorithm involved, the dual EC DRBG CSPRNG.
That is a mouthful. For the average listener, let's break down what a CSPRNG is and why this specific one was so problematic.
Okay, so a CSPRNG stands for a cryptographically secure pseudo-random number generator. In simple terms, this is the complex mathematical engine that creates the digital keys and random sequences necessary for secure encryption.
If your CSPRNG is weak or compromised, your entire security system is compromised.
And the dual EC-DRBG algorithm was widely suspected to be compromised by whom? By the NSA. This specific algorithm was known to contain what researchers believed was a mathematical backdoor, a sort of master key that would allow anyone, specifically the NSA, to predict the output of the random number generator and therefore easily decrypt the supposedly secure communications.
And BlackBerry's software supported this algorithm.
It did. And the ultimate irony, BlackBerry Limited actually owned a U.S. patent that covered the technical design of the backdoor itself. While the company didn't issue an advisory, they were fully aware of the algorithm's vulnerability, demonstrating the tension between their role as a security provider and their often unspoken relationship with intelligence agencies.
This complexity just underscores the dual role BlackBerry played, pioneering security while simultaneously operating under intense surveillance pressures, often sacrificing consumer privacy to maintain government access.
It's a profound tension inherent in modern tech. The need to maintain security, but also the pressure to offer governments backdoors. BlackBerry was caught right in the middle.
We can't wrap up this epic rise and fall without mentioning its enduring cultural echo.
The story continues to fascinate the public because it's a perfect illustration of disruption. The 2023 dramatized film BlackBerry, adapted from the nonfiction book Losing the Signal, shows the continued cultural interest in how a company that soared so high could fall so fast. Even at its lowest points, BlackBerry was desperately trying to maintain cultural weight, engaging in high-profile celebrity endorsements, including Alicia Keys, Beyoncé, U2, and Diplo, trying to pivot to the lifestyle market they had fatally ignored years earlier.
So where does this leave us? The core takeaway is clear. BlackBerry's story is the ultimate cautionary tale that past success pioneering push email, establishing military-grade security does not guarantee future survival. The arrogance fostered by their initial triumph prevented them from adapting to a changing consumer and ecosystem landscape. They won the battle for the corporate keyboard, but they lost the war for the internet and multimedia experience.
And that leads to our final provocative thought for you, the listener. Given that BlackBerry successfully executed a radical pivot to focus entirely on cybersecurity and IoT services, reporting healthy revenue in FY 2024 in these new sectors, is their ultimate success story the fact that they survived the smartphone failure by radically changing their identity, proving adaptability in the long run? Or are they always destined to be remembered as the cautionary tale about Mike Lazaridis and Jim Balsillie misjudging a competitor's vision, the most mythological failure of foresight?
And think back to that massive $612.5 million settlement they paid to NTP for patent infringement. Was that costly patent war the first high-cost sign that holding tightly to intellectual property and sticking stubbornly to their initial technology, rather than investing massively in innovation beyond it, would be a recurring, financially punitive theme that ultimately derailed the company?
A powerful point to consider. The cost of protecting the past often drastically outweighs the investment required to build the future. You have to be willing to destroy your own successful model before someone else does it for you.